Okay. It is 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started, as long as I'm not on mute. Good evening and welcome to the 6 p.m. City Council meeting for Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. Let the roll call reflect that all council members are present. Let's make sure. Yep. We'll first begin with a Pledge of Allegiance by Vice Chair White.
Thank you. Please stand if you are able and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair White. And now we would ask all those who are joining us to join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. First on the agenda is reports from administration. And the first item is the airport ordinance amendments. And we have Gary Williams, the city attorney, here to present that tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just present my screen. Okay, do you see the presentation screen?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So we have a proposed ordinance on airport fee and lease amendments. We have discussed this several different versions, both of the Airport Advisory Committee at 2 different work sessions. I don't really plan on repeating everything we've talked about in those, but kind of giving a summary of the most important items. The first item is that we have some fee amendments. We've gone into those in a lot of detail in prior meetings. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because they're self-explanatory upon reading. It seems like the item that most people are interested in are the lease renewals, and so we want to spend a little bit of time on that. Right now, under our current ordinance structure, we have, for new construction, a spectrum of lease terms, or the length of terms. We have 15 years for private hangar owners, 20 years for commercial operators, 25 years for fixed base operator. Of course, that has nothing to do with the type of building. You could have the same building with 3 different types of tenants going in it, and they'd all have different lengths of lease terms under our current ordinance. Our current ordinance also provides for a 1-year renewal possibility. And we have found over time, especially as we're looking at redeveloping the west side of our airport, that those terms are often too short to attract significant airport development. And so we've been looking for a new standard. In looking for the new standard, we looked for FAA guidance. And FAA guidance on ground leases is summarized as I have on the slide, which is the length of the ground lease should be long enough to amortize tenants' capital investment. Of course, the whole idea of a ground lease is that tenant is going to be the one that's going to invest in and build the hangar or other building. And so you want to make sure you give them enough time to amortize their capital investment. And during that time period, according to the FAA, it's okay to have a below fair market rent so that they have enough time to amortize that investment. The FAA has given various guidance about how long a ground lease should be. Some guidance says 30 or 35 years is more than enough to amortize almost any building, and 40 years is enough to amortize it or to depreciate it under the tax structure. So they think that most hangar leases should be under 40 years, but they will allow beyond that under special circumstances where there's an exceptionally high capital investment. But if it's over 50 years, then they have kind of provided that as the red line and say that may clearly violate a FAA grant assurance where the airport essentially loses the control and ownership over its property. So a lease over 50 years requires some special FAA approval. The other guidance the FAA gives is regarding the end of the lease. And so the end of the lease, the FAA advises, guides, expects the city or the airport sponsor to exercise reversionary rights. And reversionary rights means that the airport takes back possession of the land and any improvements that are still on the land. And then at the end of taking those back, the airport can and should rent the land and any improvements that are still there for fair market value. So taking that guidance, we then came up with a new plan for new construction. And so in the ordinance, we've used very similar language to the FAA guidance and said that we will allow the airport manager to enter into contracts for a sufficient number of years necessary to amortize the tenant's capital investment. So there's going to be some math going on there. There's going to be some discussions of what the capital investment is and how long it'll take to amortize that. And then the airport manager is given a limit. He can't go above 40 years as the maximum. And you'll see in a minute that we'll use that standard as well. That 40-year maximum is the standard for old construction ground leases as well. So at the end of a new construction ground lease, the airport will exercise its reversionary rights, which means it'll take possession of the land and the improvements. And then it turns around and rents that land for fair market value through a facility lease. So that's the general structure on the new construction, and you'll see that we're using the same standards for old construction. The airport has lots of hangars that are pre-existing construction, about 250 of them. Some are just being built now, and some were built up to 74 years ago. So there's a wide range of old construction. And so in the past, the airport has not had a clear goal of when it would exercise its reversionary rights, which it's always had in the contracts. Your recommendation today for the administration is to use the same standard, a 40-year maximum, from the construction lease date. And so the airport manager will be empowered to grant renewals, lease renewals, up to 40 years after the construction lease date. If there's a timely application, if that use is still consistent with the airport plan, and if the tenant's compliant with airport rules and regulations. At the end of the lease, the airport exercises its reversionary rights, which means it takes possession of the land and improvements that are still on the property. So it then turns around, just like with new construction, and rents the land for fair market value through facility leases. So let's talk quickly about facility leases. Facility leases are those leases of improvements owned by the city. So we're not looking at anything being constructed by the tenant. The improvements are already there. And so we already have, of course, some facilities on the airport. And there's a possibility that we'll take more facilities, more improvements after airport leases expire, and especially those who choose not to remove the improvements. And so airport facility leases are leased for fair market rental value as set forth in the FAA guidance. But we do recognize that it's going to be a little bit different determining the fair market rental value when you have improvements involved, because they're going to vary based on age and size and location, finish, condition, lots of other factors. And so basically the new ordinance amendments give the airport manager some marching orders about how he should come up with commercially reasonable methods to determine fair market value. And then one of the really important things is that the pre-existing tenant or the prior tenant, whether it be a ground lease or the prior facility lease, will be given a preference. A preference, if the city is going to continue to rent that property for the same purposes, then it's going to first go and offer that lease to the prior tenant. We think that'll have some win-win effects. We hope it will. And that is that the tenant will be able to have some foreseeability of staying in his hangar even after the ground leases have expired. And we hope that the tenant will also be incentivized to then keep the hangar in reasonable repair, given the idea that he will want to stay with that over time. So that's, in a nutshell, what our ordinance says. And let me also comment on what I expect to be some concerns about whether this is violating any existing lease rights. And I think it's important to know that it is not. We have ground leases on the airport right now that have terms from anywhere from 5 years to 25 years. The 5 years is because the renewals that we do are for 5 years. And the 25 years is that's the longest lease term for an FBO. And so all of those are in different stages of completion, but we have some pretty wide ranges. But all of them say that at the end of the lease, the landlord takes possession of the premises. And so the landlord is entitled to the reversionary rights at the end of the lease. All of them also say that the tenant may remove improvements within 60 days after the end of the term. And if the tenant fails to remove improvements, then those improvements are owned by the airport landlord. There is nothing in this ordinance that will change or cut short or eliminate those contractual rights of existing contracts. They will have what they've always had. And so they will have those lease agreements. And in fact, they will have all the benefits of their lease agreements. What this ordinance is really focused on is not current lease agreements, but it's focused on future lease agreements that the airport manager might enter into. And so we're setting the new standards for future agreements, but we're keeping the existing contract language for existing agreements. And so you might have some people say, well, this is a total surprise to me. I thought that leases were going to go on forever. And there's something to what they're saying. The truth is that the city has not always, and for many years has only rarely exercised its reversionary rights in these hangars. And there's been much discussion amongst airport managers and administration and even some advisory committee members and even in some public meetings talking about the eventual day that the city would exercise reversionary rights. And for various reasons, that's been delayed. And so now we want to use the new standard as a forecast for everybody to know what the city is expected to do in the future on lease agreements. So it kind of sets parameters for the airport agreement, and it sets a forecast. It sets parameters for the airport manager, and it sets a forecast for airport tenants. So that's a summary, and it doesn't go over everything because, again, we've talked about this many times. Do you have any questions for me? If not, I'll be happy to end my presentation, and then we can listen to any comments from the public.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. Are there any other questions?
I do have one question, Gary. If let's say an FBO wanted to really spiff up their facility, and would they then come to the airport manager and say, we want to spend $200,000 here to give our space a facelift, but we'd like you to agree to extend our lease a certain amount of time? Is that something that this would allow for, or is that something it just wouldn't?
I don't think it would allow the airport manager to make that decision. The ordinance had before and still has language that allows the mayor to exercise his discretion as property manager And as the only one who can enter into contracts, he can exercise his discretion to, in the case of substantial capital improvement, negotiate terms outside of these parameters. But it probably wouldn't fall just to the airport manager. He would have to stick within these parameters.
All right.
By the way, the mayor would usually go to the FAA to get their input as well on something like that.
Okay. I don't see anything for Gary. Sorry, I can hear him now. If there's no other questions for Gary Williams, we'll go ahead and open this up to public input. If we could just have if we can just have Eric go ahead and tell or explain how that would work. Seems like we have quite a few attendees, and I'm sure they want to know how this process will work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. For those of you who'd like to participate in tonight's public hearing and provide input on this item, you must be joining us via Zoom, and you can raise your hand by using the raise hand feature in the bottom of your application. And for those of you joining us via telephone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. And please remember to state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. And could we also get your the address also? State your name and address. Okay. We'll go ahead now and accept public input on the airport ordinance amendments. First, it looks like we have Doug Durbano. Hopefully I said that correctly. He will go ahead and unmute you, and you will have 3 minutes, Mr. Durbano.
I've hit my unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Chair, council members, thank you. I'm Doug Durbano. I'm here representing the Ogden Regional Airport Association. I am an attorney. I've had numerous conversations and interactions with my friend Gary Williams on this subject, and I bring to the council significant information, and I ultimately will conclude, and I have sent in a quick written statement of our positions, objections, and suggested solutions, but I want to start with where I want to end. I believe it's imperative that this deliberative body, this legislative body, receive us in a work session, because there is so much more that needs to be gone over that simply can't be accomplished in the 3 minutes that we have tonight. Again, I've visited with Gary at great length, but the council needs to be aware that the organization, the association, has hired us as attorneys to review the legality of this particular ordinance and the amendments, as well as the historical implementation of the ordinance. It is our opinion, and we voiced it most aggressively, that the adoption of the ordinance and amendments as proposed creates a legal minefield that will be very, very challenging. Now, there's the problem. There are solutions, which are that we could modify what it is that the city and the airport manager would like to do and avoid these potential lawsuits. Let me just quickly now, so we're asking that we might table this amendment and be invited to at least a 30-minute presentation in a working session so we could talk openly about both the facts and the full broad spectrum of the facts, as well as the law applicable thereto. And again, the association has spent their money coming up with the law. Let me make a couple real quick points in the time that I'm allotted. First off, we're dealing with non-commercial leases. Mr. Williams' presentation really focuses on the FAA handbook dealing with commercial leases. They simply do not apply in this case. Secondly, reversionary rights. The city owns no reversionary rights. The FAA and the US government owns reversionary rights. The city actually owns its property, and the tenant lessees own the personal property on top of that. The city has never owned it, therefore it cannot have property that never owned revert back to it. This is the classic government taking, and the attempt of this amendment is to do a end run around that government taking. And if this ordinance is passed, I've got 5 seconds, it triggers a taking, and arguably every hangar has to be bought by the county, the city.
Thank you, Mr. Durbano. Mr. Durbano. Before we go on, just as a reminder, we do have a lot of people that want to speak tonight, and in an effort to be respectful, we just ask those to keep your comments new and try not to continually repeat what has been previously mentioned. Next up, we have, it looks like Martin. Martin, go ahead. The time, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record, and the time is now yours. Yep.
Hi, my name is Martin O'Loughlin. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That pop-up came late. So my address is 1068 East, 5750 South in South Ogden. But more importantly, my 5 businesses are headquartered at 4225 Airport Road. In order to keep this fresh and keep this short, because I imagine there are many different things, I would just like to give you one example of why this proposal has some dramatic effects on people who invested in Ogden City and Ogden Airport in good faith. Less than 2 years ago, I bought a hangar on Ogden Airport that was less than 20 years old. It was built with a 75-year commercial building expected lifetime. In accordance with the city's desires and requirements, I spent 30% more than the acquisition cost, bringing it up to modern, meaning 2019 standards, so that I could get a commercial lease. When I made those decisions, there was nothing on the horizon that at 40 years total building longevity, that I would give it up to the city. I did research, and I looked at the building, the build out of the airport. I looked at the long-term plans. I looked at the fact that the city had given leases to my direct neighbors, and that the property that I was buying was not in an anticipated redevelopment zone. And I felt like it was a good business decision that I was protected by brand new construction that was going in. So I did everything that was required in order to get a 20-year lease with a 5-year extension, and was betting that when and if the city intended to redevelop my property, I would see that in public discussions and in actions taken by the council, and I would have time to react to that. And so I made an investment, and now I'm into this $500,000. And instead of at least 25 years and up to whatever, and I realize the legal limitations, before the ink was dry on my lease, the deal is different. And now I will lose my building at 21 years, not only if you and the rest of the city machinery decide that it's necessary to take it for redevelopment. I'm simply going to lose it to the city, who will then become my landlord, and you will have 55 years left of commercial use of the building I invested in. And I didn't have 40 years to depreciate it. I had 20, and the tax code doesn't allow me to depreciate it in 20 years. So I will have lost $500,000 with only half of that as a tax benefit. So thanks.
Thank you, Martin. Okay. Next up, it looks like we have, I believe it's Renee. Go ahead, Renee. State your name and name and address for the record, and then limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I'm Renee Felker. I live at 1061 East, 4975 South in Ogden. I've been a hangar owner at the airport since 2007 and a former EAA Chapter 58 president. And through my activities, I've provided a lot of support to the airport, both financial and other. I'll cut right to my chase. In 2014, I made a decision to purchase a hangar. I got the standard lease at the time, and that's when I made my investment. The argument being made is that the FAA, which I do not agree with your lawyer in all respects, but the FAA says we should get 30 to 35 years to amortize and make a reasonable return on investment. I know this is commercial lease talk and this is a private hangar, but still the same. But I'm not going to get 30 years. I'm going to get at the best 20 underneath my current lease. And I think that's totally unfair. And it disadvantages the people who have committed to support the airport over the years. We're the guys out there doing it. We're paying our fees. We're doing our things. So if I'm not allowed to renew the lease, then I've lost it. The other part is that all this activity and the discussion from the airport to potential tenants have made the hangar's value dive and make them unsellable in some cases. And I think that's been unfair. And I personally think it's deliberate in nature. They say it isn't, but it is deliberate in nature. Because by driving the price of the hangar down and the use list, sooner or later we're going to give up. If I have an asset worth zero, what am I going to do to protect it? Nothing. I'm just going to give up and give it to the city. The city is worried about protecting the rights of the citizen, is what is stated. Unfortunately, the citizens who are involved in the acquisition of hangars in support of the airport are the ones they are not caring about, and they're mistreating us. The city has referenced a letter from Ventura County Airport Manager to the Ventura County Airport Manager from the FAA, and it states that the considerations for lease changes to do the revisions should consider the amortization status and the history of local leasing practices. The history has been renewal upon request. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, next up we have, and please help me on this one, my nod. I don't even know how to say the last part, but if that's you, my nod, you are now, it's your turn. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Can I yield my time back to Doug Durbano?
We're not allowed to do that.
Well, then I guess I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next up we have a David Westwood. Go ahead, David. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
All right, my name is Dave Westwood. I currently reside at 1471 King Circle in Red Lodge, Montana. I'm here, of course, because I own a hangar in Ogden. And as a fellow city council member, albeit in a different state, in a different city, I appreciate the position you folks are in tonight. I also appreciate the request by Chairman Blair warning us against that position where everything's been said, just not everybody has said it. So I will try to make my comments unique. Marcia, I appreciated your questions during the work session, as well as Doug and Richard. I'd like to offer my thoughts regarding some of the answers I heard Mr. Williams provide during the work session. Marcia, specifically, I heard Mr. Williams respond to your question about the impact to existing versus new leases. I understood his response to be that these changes would not impact any existing leases and presumptively by extension, current leaseholders. These new proposed changes would only impact new leases and by extension, new leaseholders. In terms of practical impact, that is not at all what I see. Most significantly, existing leaseholders are impacted in that the value of their personal property has quite literally dropped to nothing due to the city's actions and stated intentions. As I understood, the main crux of arguments presented by Mr. Williams is the fact that the city has a fiduciary responsibility to get fair market value for the properties it holds in the public trust. As a council member, I understand that responsibility, but I think it's worth noting The property the city holds in the public trust is the land, not the improvements that are on the property, not the building that I or other hangars owner built or purchased. The only way that becomes property in the public trust is if the city first takes it. In fact, when we purchased that property, it was based on the understanding, based on a very long history and on discussions with the then airport management, that we could own, sell, or even die and leave that asset to our heirs. We were in fact partner investors in Ogden Airport. The purchase decision was not based on depreciation or amortization charts in my case. It was based on the cost of renting versus purchasing, much the same way purchasing a home is weighed against renting. Instead, the city, through their actions and announcements intended to take our hangars, have already taken away the value of our personal property. Instead, when we attempt to sell a building, our personal property, interest immediately drops when a prospective buyer goes to talk to the airport manager and are informed that the hangar can be taken with practically no notice. I believe that's as low as 90 days in some situations right now, and at best a 5-year lease. As a specific example, a hangar of a friend of mine that died was professionally appraised at $135,000. It sold less than a year later for $40,000. That was at the beginning of this. Values have only continued to drop. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next up is Ryan Dixon. Thank you for being here. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, my name is Ryan Dixon. I live at 1975 East, 6600 South in Ogden. Hello, my name is Ryan. I'm 26 years old, and I'm a third-generation pilot born in Ogden, Utah. Over the course of the past few months, I have tried to become as informed as possible about the situation regarding the airport leases and Title VIII. My reason to comment here today is to represent not only the interests of my family-owned hangars on the field, but also the upcoming younger generation of pilots. I've always dreamed one day of owning, not renting or leasing, my own airplane as well as my own hangar at the airport. And due to the most recent updates, it seems like this dream is in jeopardy at the Ogden Airport. After finishing my flight school at an Ogden-based flight school, it became very clear that all other students had the same dream. As a fresh private pilot, my goal was to purchase and own my own 40 to 50-year-old hangar in good shape and integrity, and to simply store an airplane out of the elements. It seems as if Ogden City has an unfair advantage in this situation, and quite frankly, is completely neglecting current and future pilots in the area. Acquiring hangars owned at little to no cost to simply turn around and profit from seems to me as an unethical and disrespectful approach to hangar owners. I understand there needs to be an improvement. There needs to be improvements and redevelopment for growth at the airport, but there also needs to be a better solution than this. Future growth needs to be sensible, sustainable, and not just demolishing good, functional structures to replace them with something similar. I have both friends and family who own hangars on the field, who have put their sweat and tears into financing and building them, but now could possibly lose them in an instant. As an aviation student who would electively drive to Ogden from Salt Lake City 3 to 4 times a week to support my local airport and city, as well as in the best interests of myself, my past colleagues, my family, and all hangar owners at the airport, I suggest the City Council take a closer look at this impact it can and will bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, next up we have David Shumway. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Oh. It looks like it's back on mute.
Okay, are we on?
That's better. Yep.
Okay, thank you. My name is David Shumway. I reside in Pleasant View, Utah, but I own a business on 3974 Airport Road across from the terminal and sell products worldwide. I am a hangar owner, and since 1996, I have built 5 hangars out at the airport, and I believe the last hangar to be built inside the fence. And each time it was a little bit more difficult as more requirements were placed on us. In the last hangar, we were required to put in storm drain systems and including fire hydrant. I was willing to do this, and I know others were, because of the history of a friendly business environment out at the airport and a free trade system of being able to buy and sell or trade hangars. I've been a good tenant. I pay my city taxes, my city lease, and county leases or county taxes as well. And I take great pride in my property. I want to make improvements to them and maintain them. And all this time during the past 25 years or so, we were welcome to build. But now that it seems most of the property has been leased up, at least on the east side, and there's very little left, the tables seem to have turned. Now, as a businessman, I try to make decisions based on good information. Had I known ahead of time that this environment was going to change such that we would forfeit our properties, there was no way, or there would be no way, that I would make that type of investment. I've sat in previous meetings when we were informed and promised by the city attorney that they did not want to take our hangars. And so we had this hope that it would continue to be such, but it does not appear to be that way. The other concern I have is the way that things are purported as this 30-year lease or 20-year lease or 40-year lease or whatever is an amortization schedule that you then utilize that amortization over that time, and the value then becomes zero. As a business owner and businessman, I can assure you, and knowing the IRS laws, yes, they are depreciated, but that does not mean the asset goes to zero. There is always a value there. And if sold, then property taxes or recapture taxes are realized and paid. So I would just hope that the city council would understand some of the misinformation that's going on and the assumptions that are given when they may not be actually accurate. And I would hope that we could once again return to a friendly environment that would include business development and inspire that type of improvement. Whereas now, if we know we are giving up our hangars, there's very little incentive to make those improvements that we all want. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, next up we have Sheila Garvey. Go ahead, Sheila. Please say your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Sheila Garvey. I live at 200 Cedar Bench Drive in South Weber. I own 2 hangars on the Ogden Airport, the most recent of which I bought in July of 2020. At that point, I spent several $1,000s getting a seismic inspection on my hangar so that I could receive a 15-year lease. I did receive a 15-year lease, and I received a verbal commitment from the current airport manager that I would be eligible for another 15-year lease once this expired. And then I would be able to receive additional 5-year leases following that, the completion of that lease. I would have never have invested the amount of money that I invested in this hangar. I would have never paid another $25,000 to repair the roof, knowing that this hangar is probably going to be taken away from me in 15 years. This was meant to be a long-term investment, not something that was going to go away in 15 years. And, it seems to me that most of these leases that we have discussed, it's historical. You should have known about it. My lease is less than a year old. And I was made verbal promises at that time that are being completely contradicted by what's currently going on. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Okay. I don't see any more hands raised. Oh, now I do. Okay. Looks like we have a Jill Coford. Please state your name and address for the record, Jill, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Jill Coford. I live at 2110 Hampton Circle in Ogden, Utah. I'm currently pending as a member of the Airport Advisory Board. I have a background in teaching and I'm a private pilot. I'm not an airport hangar owner. However, I feel like it's important to speak to how this appears to those of us that have invested a lot of time and energy at a place that we love, and that's the Ogden Airport. Municipalities have a responsibility to provide some very basic services to their communities and not necessarily be in competition with private enterprise. And given the changes and the proposals that are being made by the current administration, it feels like and seems like that the airport wants to be in business to make money instead of breaking even and maintaining what I believe is the proper role of government. The thought process that it's okay for the city to just take away people's property is unsavory. It doesn't sit well with people who have invested millions and millions of dollars and years as good, solid business partners who want to see this airport succeed. The tactics that are being handed down just don't feel right. And I would echo what Doug Durbano has said and ask that the city council would take some time to sit down with a work session with the stakeholders involved so that we can come to a solution that works for everyone. I think there's an answer out there that doesn't feel like government overreach. And I would encourage you to do that. As an Ogden City citizen, I see the value and the benefit that this airport brings. I think that there are things that are immeasurable out there. And I feel like we have a responsibility to those business people and those private people who have invested so much in that airport to sit down with them and to really think through this and make some good decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jill. Next up, we have Scott Dixon. Scott Dixon, go ahead, state your name and address for the record, and then limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name's Scott Dixon. I reside at 1975 East, 6600 South in Ogden. I also have several businesses that are located at 3768 Pacific Avenue in Ogden. I believe you also have a number of written comments that probably should be reviewed and responded to. Mine being one of them, and I know of several others that have probably come your way. I wanted to take a brief minute and just thank everyone who's involved in attempting to understand and resolve the issues at the Ogden Airport. I believe we also have an honorable airport advisory committee, and I sense that there needs to be a more open dialogue and a decision-making process between the committee and the city. I also believe all the citizens in the area benefit from all that the airport offers. I know sometimes that's not fully understood and appreciated. Also, government, I believe, is here to serve and unify, not to create this divisiveness. Right now, I'm concerned with this us against them positioning we are currently experiencing. This is being fueled by the threat of taking away hangars, rewriting city policy and ordinances, booting out the FBOs, raising fees. I understand economics, but I'm concerned a portion of this is government overreach. I think a precedent was clearly set by the city, both downtown and the airport management over the years, to lease the land and renew it. It's a common practice and accepted by the FAA, and if it's administered properly, the renewal of land leases does not jeopardize federal grants and FAA funding. I have a building that we constructed out there in 1977, so 44 years ago. It continues to function properly and it's in good shape, and I would hope there's another 44 years left in it. I've also built a number of hangars out there over the years for Flying J, Young Automotive, Mountain Valley, and a number of others. I'm also building the last 2 hangars on the south end of Airport Road for myself and Richard Hendrickson, the president and CEO of Lifetime Products. And in discussions with him, we're not certain we would be constructing these new $1 million facilities, hangars at the Ogden Airport, knowing what is currently being considered by the city. I think a bombshell was dropped on us February 18th when Mike Nichols' comment that there's a threat of these hangars being taken. So I simply have a hard time thinking that the city will take these structures at no cost to purchase and then profit from them. If the city wants to be, in the airport leasing business or the hangar rental business, they should pursue it as such in acquiring it. In summary, I respect what is trying to be done, but I don't think that amending Title VIII to the benefit of the city at the expense of pushing the others aside is the answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Next up, we have Ed McKinney. Please state your name and address for the record, Ed, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all for participating tonight. Attorney Durbano asked for a meeting with the city council and the decision makers instead of voting this evening. And I'd like to reinforce that. Mr. Williams quotes the FAA. I sincerely encourage the council to view the FAA documents, and you will see that they are guidelines. They are not policies. The words that Mr. Williams has used today involve things like requires. Look for that word and see if you can find it. And as recently as today in the city council's working session, one of the council members made the comment that we're not taking possession of the hangars, right? That indicates to me that the city council has not been briefed accurately on what the consequences to Ogden Airport are. And I would sincerely request that you delay any decisions on voting on Mr. Williams' ordinances just for that reason alone. As you've heard tonight, business owners are surprised, and we, as business owners, we make decisions based on rules, not surprises. And with that, I will say thank you for your consideration tonight.
Thank you, Ed. Okay. Next up, we have Angel Castillo. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Angel Castillo, Ogden resident. This is a challenging position to be in. There's information and a lot of upset people that have hangars at the airport. But as council members, I think you owe it to the public and you owe it to protect the city from potential lawsuit. I think that tabling this to have a meeting with the airport hangar owner's attorney, Mr. Durbano, would be wise. And I don't think the world is going to come to an end if this isn't voted on today. You could vote on it next week, have a work session, and take a look at all of the legalities. I'm guessing that an attorney wouldn't be here and wouldn't be saying that there's potential for lawsuit if there isn't. And it would be in the city's best interest to protect and shield us from potential loss to a lawsuit. And also, you constantly in all of your budget proposals say that transparency is a key thing that you strive for as a council. And I believe that if you would meet with the attorney and then perhaps hear some feedback from some stakeholders, find a solution that is going to work for both the hangars and the city. Obviously, we need to progress and we need to move forward. And I understand that some things need to change. But I also think it's imperative that if you have an opportunity to shield the city from potential lawsuit, that you do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Angel. Okay. Next up, we have a cell phone caller. The last 3 digits end in 223. If that is you and your hand is raised, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. I don't know if you're there. It's a call-in, someone on a cell phone, and the last 3 numbers are 223.
Chair, they may have to. Oh, there they go.
Okay, can you?
Yep.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, this is Leslie Briggs. I'm presently the chair of the Ogden Airport Advisory Committee. My comments I actually emailed to the committee yesterday. I don't know if any of the members received those comments. I'm an Ogden resident, 858 Avalon Hills Drive. I've been chair on this committee since November last year. I've actually been on this committee for the last 10 years, and I'm not a hangar owner, as and in my notes earlier on today, yesterday that I emailed you, I want to make note that only one member on this committee is an airport hangar owner. So the other 6 sitting members have actually cited against, we've actually voted 4 to 6 against these present amendment ordinance changes here. One thing I really want to point out, and I direct the committee to, is the 5th Amendment and the Just Compensation Clause, which states, while the federal government has a constitutional right to take private property for public use, the 5th Amendment's Just Compensation Clause, interpreted as market value, requires the government to pay just compensation value at the time of takings. Much of what's mentioned in this here is reversion to the city, but there's no mention of what the compensation the city will pay for these hangars to the tenants here. So I invite you to read my comments before making any decision on this vote here. They were fairly extensive and research comments. And I understand there's an extensive development on the west side, which will bring substantial income into the city. And I thank you for taking the time and any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Daniel. Thanks for being here. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Blumel. I live at 1968 Grant Avenue. And I just wanted to draw a simple parallel in this situation that I think makes a stark contrast. And that is, I lived in China for 2 years. In China, the government owns all the land everywhere in the entire country of China. However, people own buildings, businesses, and individuals own buildings in China, and they get those buildings for 70 years. At the end of 70 years, it reverts back to the Chinese government. They tear that building down and build a new building. If they decide they want to take that building prior to 70 years, they pay fair market value for the remaining value of that building, whether it's 30 years old, 50 years old, or whatever. I think it's ridiculous that we can't do better here than they do in China with their citizens in terms of the value of the years that we are entitled to for our hangars. That's all I have to say. I think we can do better than China. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay. Seeing no more hands raised, I would open it up. Oh, here we go. Next up, it looks like we have a Gary Silver. Gary, go ahead and state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, my name's Gary Silver. I'm a physician, recently retired, live in Farmington, Utah, 1914 Summerwood Drive. I own a rather substantial hangar out at the Ogden Airport S395, in which I house 3 aircraft, and I've been there since 1996. My comments are these. In one of the previous Zoom meetings that I attended, the statement was made, and I don't remember if it was by Mr. Williams or the airport manager, but that they saw that the future of aviation was on the commercial side and not in general aviation. And I could see that then that dollar signs were only accruing in their minds for business jet owners and so on and so forth. And I think that's extremely short-sighted, because as that young gentleman earlier stated, you need to start out with young people interested in flying to generate the pilots that will fly those business jets and bigger aircraft. But in my case, I've spent my entire 54 years of flying in general aviation, starting at age 17 and now at age 71. And I've never seen anything quite like this revision process that's being proposed. I think it's short-sighted. It instantaneously undercut the value of all the hangars at the airport. I've personally petitioned the Weber County assessor to lower my property tax rates, and to based on the idea that my hangar will be valueless in 15 years, to prorate my property taxes down to 0 value by the end of that 15-year period. It will in no respect be valueless at that point. It will be more valuable than what I paid. Any less valuable than, for instance, your home. If you buy a $100,000 home, in 10 years, will it be worthless? No, it will actually appreciate in value, as are our hangars, except for the city's actions. And I request that the city council seriously consider working this through more, and there's a better solution. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, there's a hand raised, and I can't tell if it's the same Daniel we've already heard from or if it's a new Daniel. Oh, never mind. Okay. Next up is Dwight. Go ahead and state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Dwight Baldwin, 5877 South, 1050 East, South Ogden, Utah. I'm the vice chair of the Airport Advisory Board, and I am the only hangar owner mentioned. I would respectfully request that the idea of Doug Durbano of having a working session would be important to have, as you're making this very important decision. And that's the only comment I have. I'd like to encourage that working meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Okay, next up we have a Destiny Schneider. Please state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Schneider Destine. I live at 280 Northwest Temple in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've been at Ogden for about 3 years now. My experience with the management of Ogden has been very positive. Sometimes I'll stop by just to say hi to the ladies over there, and because I just like everybody over there. I was told about this not even 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, and I didn't believe it. And this just doesn't make any sense. Everybody's been saying it. I think we all just have to come to the same page. I rented for a year before I bought my hangar. And so what I do is I provide long-term care pharmacy services to seniors in long-term care settings, nursing homes, assisted living, in Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. And I also have a home health company that provides services in in Utah, throughout the state of Utah. And I fly multiple times a week for work. When I go through, and when I acquire all these companies, I go through contracts like nobody else. And nothing that I ever signed told me that I was giving my hangar away after any amount of period. I jumped through hoops to get the city to approve my hangar for a lease. And, it is what it is. I'm not complaining about that, but this is just, it's unacceptable, guys. We're trying to do good work there. We're trying to take care of our properties. We're trying to make Ogden the place to be. I love driving there. I go there for lunch every time I drive up. And this is like a black eye. This completely makes no sense. And I'm frustrated because it's not the experience I've had with the team at Ogden, but it doesn't make sense that our property's being ripped away from us. It doesn't make sense that rent goes up 30%. That really doesn't make sense. But it also doesn't make sense that we're losing our property. So I just wanted to put my voice in and say, I've been doing business for a long time. I seem to be somewhat good at it. And this does not make any business sense whatsoever. It's just a black eye to all the people who've invested in Ogden. And I think we'll hurt it down the road. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Schneider. Next, we have a Mark C. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Can you hear me at this time?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Mark Cowley. I reside at 133 West Lowman View Drive in North Ogden. I'm a hangar owner out at the Ogden Airport. Currently own 2 hangars and have loved my experience at Ogden. But am like most here tonight, I don't know if anyone has commented that they're very happy with the plan that is coming forth from the city at this time. But my point, to be a little bit different, would be to say that there is absolutely a need for the council to hear more discussion on this. One thing that I would bring up for the council to review is that there are many different ways of managing leases on airports. One that I think that is interesting that I found is a lease from one of our neighbors, Heber City. This is the title of the lease. It says it's a standard non-reversionary ground lease agreement. We've been given one option tonight by Mr. Williams, a reversionary lease only. That's the only thing you've considered. There are many other ways of doing this, and our neighbors have don't have to reinvent the wheel every time this comes up. I think the council needs to be informed on what they're doing and know that there are other options out there that may address the concerns of hangar owners and allow for a more fair and equitable policy going forward for Ogden City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, we appreciate those that took the time to comment tonight. I don't see any other hands raised. With that, we can go ahead and open it up to council discussion or we can ask Gary Williams to come back up and address some of the questions or comments that were raised. Any comments from council members or questions for Gary Williams?
So Gary, I have a quick question. So I asked the question in the work session about the leases. Are we So every lease is standard, correct? And every lease, well, I should answer. Every lease is standard, correct? And then the second part of that question is in that lease, does it already have a reversionary clause in it?
Thank you. Every lease is standard for the time that was entered into. There are times throughout the last couple of decades that we've updated our lease agreements. Significant changes were made in October of 2006, I believe. I'm sorry, 2016, and then in 17, there's been changes since then. So generally, the way the FAA looks at it is you treat people similarly by giving them the same lease if they're entering into it at the same time. So that's kind of a long answer to your standard question. The clause, I think I just want to show you. We've heard many people shocked and amazed that there is a concept in their leases, or that they don't have a lease that says such a thing. This is the lease up until about October of 2016 that we used for about 20 years before that. And this is the clause that is pretty much the same throughout time. It says, upon a termination of this lease, lessee shall have the right to remove any improvements erected by lessee on the premises during the lease term or any renewal. Lessee, upon removal of any improvements, shall restore the land to as good a condition as it was prior to the erection of any improvements thereon. Lessee hereby agrees that removal of any and all improvements shall be completed on or before 60 days from the termination of this lease. The lessee hereby consents and agrees that any improvements remaining on the premises after the 60-day removal period shall be deemed abandoned and owned by the lessor, that's the city, without any claim or right whatsoever in lessee. And so this clause has been in our contracts for decades. There is no surprise. I cannot believe that everybody who spoke to you tonight did not read their contract. But even if they did not read their contract, they were bound to the terms of their contract. I will tell you that anybody who's built in the last couple of years, I've had a personal conversation with them. And I don't want to embarrass anybody, but they all know about this clause. They all know about the fact that they could not have, that there's a possibility that there would be no renewal at the end of the lease, and that this clause or the successor clause of the new contracts that are even stronger would apply to them. And so there's a lot of discussion tonight about surprise and amazement. I grant that to some people who haven't read their leases, and I get that it's a long lease and they may say, well, it's good enough for everybody else, it's good enough for me. But this has always been in the lease. And so the irony is it's unfair when the city exercises its contract rights, and in order for it to be fair for everybody else, the city must continually waive its contract rights forever. And that's essentially what we're being asked to do. And so what we're saying is we will honor each and every contract that's currently existing. And then they will have the opportunity to exercise this right. If we renew it, it'll be renewed up to the 40 years. And after that, this clause will apply, and they will have whatever actions they can do. I think I've answered your question. I have a few other things to say, but I want to stop so I don't monopolize the time.
Chair?
Yes.
I think this is, as I view it, is a complex situation. And the question, I have one or two, but the question I have is, are we under a time element by which we need to get this agreement taken care of? The reason I say that is that there are some misunderstandings as I was listening here tonight. And I would submit that we have another work session and go over some of these elements that they brought forward, and maybe meeting with a selected group so that we could come to common grounds. Now, it could be possible that what we've seen here tonight will be what we would pass. But I think we still need to look at it and see if there's any mechanisms by which we can talk and view the process. That's what I was looking at. I think I have the feeling that the airport can be a valuable entity, but it has to be, as someone mentioned, and as I view it, there has to be some time into the future by which it has to be profitable. And I think that's what Gary and the city and we as a council are looking toward, that when this airport can be more profitable and productive. Brian's doing an outstanding job there as a airport manager. But sometimes we have to step back and maybe take a few minutes and maybe look and see what's happening. And there is a possibility that what we saw tonight is what's going to happen. But at least we have an understanding of common ground.
Thank you.
Can I chime in?
Please.
I watched both airport advisory committee meetings. The one in April, the one in February and the one in March. And those were similar comments, and Gary was available at both of those meetings to answer questions and to have very open dialogue with all of these people. I'm concerned if we sit down with an attorney, we don't speak the same language as attorneys do. If they want to speak to us, they have to tone down their language. I'm happy if Gary has that conversation and then decides to make a recommendation differently to us based on some agreement that is made. But I don't feel qualified to sit down with a legal representative of the ORAA to try and haggle this thing out. I really do see it as a matter of people that hoped for something different than was written in their lease. But I just don't think that's the real world. I don't think any of us could adamantly expect us to, or anybody to go different than what is written in a legal agreement that we entered into. I just don't think that's realistic and expected. So I guess I'm not in favor of having another work session about this. I could be persuaded to table it long enough to have Gary have that if he wanted to do that. In the end, he's going to have to be the one that defends this. So I guess I'm looking for a nod or a shake of his head.
So I've had several conversations with Doug Durbano, and we have jousted on several things. He brought a new letter today. It, in my mind, isn't anything new than what we've already talked about. I don't discount the fact that they might file a lawsuit. I think we've said that explicitly in the work session. And I don't even know that if you meet all of his desires, that it won't trigger a lawsuit by somebody else not represented by Doug Durbano. There are some people that benefit from this particular ordinance, especially those who have newer hangars. And so I don't know exactly how you would have a negotiation with a group this large, especially in a work session when you typically don't have outside people come in and talk to you. But you of course have the power to table or to push off or to do a work session. I haven't sensed anything that's been given to me by the attorneys that is new or disruptive from what at least the city attorney's legal position is in our office.
I all of this happened. That a lot of feedback. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, go ahead.
You know, it's the old argument, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago. And I wish this had been done a long time ago. It doesn't make sense to have these leases go on in perpetuity. It isn't good for the city. It isn't good for the taxpayer. It isn't good for the airport. So when's the second best time to plant a tree? Well, it's today. And that's where I think we are. I think if we continue to kick this can down the road, we're just kicking this can down the road, and it's benefiting a few rather than the entire tax base of Ogden.
Mr. Chair, can I provide a comment?
Yes, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to add my voice to all the comments that Councilmember Hires made, particularly regarding the suggestion for a work session. I'm also not comfortable sitting down in that forum and negotiating other ideas with the attorney. I just don't feel qualified to do that, and I don't think it's a good idea for us to do. So I just wanted to add my voice to that, and I also appreciated his last comments about his old adage on planting a tree. He always has a good way of putting it into an adage that does make sense, and we heard a lot of comments today that made sense for me, which were proper rule of government, and in many cases, I might actually really agree with some of those opinions, but in this case, proper rule of government for me, I really need to think about the taxpayer too. So that to me is our proper role as well. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Councilmember Nadolski. And I'll go ahead and just add to what Councilmember Heyer said. As comments were being raised, I was very uneasy about the possibility of meeting with an attorney in that capacity. I agree. I don't feel qualified. I don't feel like that's a meeting that I should be part of. So I appreciate that Gary Williams has met with the attorney, and they've discussed those things, and I believe Gary Williams has been very open and upfront about the different possibilities that could face us. But like Councilmember Nadolski said, I too feel like my role is to look out for everyone, and to do that. I think it would be best if we let the attorneys meet together and not me, of course.
Chair, the reason I mentioned that is that I hope that we could come to an understanding, and I appreciate that I would not be comfortable meeting with an attorney, and I think Gary represents the city very well in that capacity. But I was just hoping that we would have have an understanding, and like it has been stated before, maybe today we need to start and implementing some of those leases and some of the contracts that are out there. But we have to have an area of understanding so that everyone has an insight of what's happening, so it can be successful. We're not talking about, we want all that have spoke here tonight. It says we're interested in providing the airport as being success. And I think everyone on the council and everyone in the administration is looking at that so that the airport can be successful. And I think it can.
Thank you. So are there future questions for Mr. Williams, or other discussion to have, or?
So, Chair, if I could ask a couple of, well, I guess questions or comments. I think one of the things I agree with you. I don't think we should sit down with any attorney. I barely got through my questions during the work session. But my second part of that is that oftentimes, and this happens all the time, and I get it, but we've tabled things for different reasons, but it seems like people became aware of this because it got on our council agenda. And I feel like maybe there's other people other than that spoke today that might want to make comment, maybe to us personally. And so I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I feel like maybe if we just put it off, or table it to just hear out other people's conversations, that would be of benefit. But that's just I heard from two people today that weren't even on the call tonight. So I guess I'm questioning. I'm sure that there was an announcement that came through the advisory board and everything, but I just don't know.
Yeah, Chair, if you don't mind, I'd just like to reiterate what Marcia was saying. We were talking about another topic, in the work session too, and it seems like that's when people become aware, is the day, the days when it's on the agenda. So I agree. I wouldn't mind putting it off. I'm not interested in the extra work session, but I'm happy to take additional comment.
Hey, Chair, maybe it would be well if we had our airport manager discuss the outreach that has happened with regard to this issue. That may address the issues that are being raised as concerns.
Yes.
Now, I'm happy to do that. So to begin with, I have had very forward conversations with everybody that has come into the office looking for a lease renewal or the idea of a purchase. And I've tried to be as straightforward to everybody as possible. And I've literally had, I'm thinking, well over 100 of those meetings where I go over in great detail what the intent is, what the current ordinance says, and what the desire is for the future, mostly focusing on the profitability of the airport. But when it comes to the specific acts that we have here, we've taken each of them to the advisory committee, and in each case gone over them in great detail. And each time we've had 40, 50, 60, as many as 80 people on the Zoom call as well. And this goes back to last November. And each piece and part, some of them were mayoral policies and others were Title VIII. This is the culmination of that tonight. But I've tried to involve as many people as possible and not just do the minimum of the requirements of showing where a public meeting is, which I think City Hall advertisement, the public library, and then on the bulletin board out here, I've used a 1,700 person MailChimp service to send out to anybody that's interested in the airport has signed up. And initially we started with a body of, that was every badge holder at the airport. And then people can either opt in or opt out, but there's a pretty active group of 1,700 people that we've reached out to. We also had some parts of this addressed as far back as 2018 with the kickoff of the master plan and going through the details of the master plan, and that project went to council last April. So that's pretty much a good summary of the outreach. Did I get to everybody? Probably not, but I got to as many as I could using the methods that were and tools that were made available.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. I remain unconvinced that we're going to come to some kind of an agreement that everybody's going to shake hands and be happy about. Nor do I think we're going to reach those people that are not reachable, for the lack of a better word. So Jared, do you mind if we just try a motion?
Yeah, so Councilmember Heyer, the only reason I say that is that sometimes people's comments trigger questions in my mind. And so that was why that's the only reason why I was saying that, not necessarily that, an outcome will be different, but.
Yeah.
I mean, just even the few questions I got today, or a few comments that I got today, and it, made me and triggered me to ask Mr. Williams questions during the work session. So I guess that's what I'm saying, is that I and maybe everybody's okay. Maybe you all have resolved in your head how, all your questions. So.
Oh, I guess for me, in as much as we're not trying to change anybody's current contractual arrangement with the city and the airport, everybody is at least getting what they've been contracted to receive. I guess I just don't know what else we would do.
Jared, may I make a comment?
Please.
And I think, I guess what I'm saying too is that I'm not necessarily going to change my mind completely about the topic, but I'm happy to listen to people and then explain my point of view to them, before we go ahead and take the vote. So similar to Vice Chair White's sentiments.
Maybe that's something that's different about me. I've been listening to them since February, and y'all haven't. So I guess I could defer to that thought.
But Chair, may I make a comment?
Please.
But is it appropriate to just ask some of those questions today? I mean, that's why we're having this meeting. I'm just curious if whoever has doubts or questions, if you could address them here.
I don't mean that I have additional questions. I mean, I haven't heard from the people that were on the call earlier. I've gotten a couple of correspondence, much like you all have, but I just agreed that maybe there's other people that have questions about it.
I'm hoping we come to an understanding. We may not change our viewpoint of it, but at least we can come to an understanding. And that's my objective, is that, I don't understand the airport, and I don't understand the lease agreement to a point, but I would hope that we could all, at least, like it has been mentioned, voice our concerns, but it may never change. What we see here tonight may be what we have going forward, but at least we have an understanding of groups.
So it looks like we have the option for two motions. If there's no other further discussion, we can either move ahead with the option to adopt this ordinance, or we can a motion to table this to a future date.
Here, let's try the ordinance, see how it goes. If you're ready, I will make that motion. I'll move that we adopt ordinance 2021-21.
Second.
We have a motion to adopt proposed ordinance 2021-21 by Councilmember Heyer and a second by Councilmember Nadolski. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Heyer.
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Councilmember Nadolski.
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens.
No.
Councilmember Chaburka.
Aye.
Vice Chair White.
No.
Chair Blair.
Aye. That passes. Oh yeah. I'll provide the opportunity for those that voted against it if they would like to give their
Yeah, I think I was hoping to get a little bit more conversation. And so that was why I voted no. I don't know that it would have ultimately changed my outcome, even if I voted next week, but I just had to at least try to give it another little bit of time to have some more conversation. So I also have to say that Councilmember Nadolski made a really good point about this is about looking after the well-being of the whole entire city, not just a section of the city. So I appreciate his comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes, I do have a great interest in the airport. And I think it could be a real valuable gem to us here in the city. It sets us apart from other communities because of the concept of our airport. And I do appreciate Gary Williams presenting and talking to those at the airport. I appreciate Brian and the work he does, and also Tom Christophilus has a desire to see the airport move forward. And so I do appreciate what the administration is doing, and they're trying to find a program that can be successful in that the airport can be profitable. And that's the goal that we have. It can be profitable and expanding, profitable and success. And I believe we need to move forward with the airport. My idea tonight would be that we could come to an area of understanding. Now, the understanding may be that, gosh, I didn't realize my lease was that way, but it is. That's what I signed, and that's my lease. And so, I have a question within my mind. Do I want to continue with that lease, or do I want to not continue? And so you have those two objectives to decide which way you want to go. I think if you look at the lease, is that the city does not want to take your property. It has no desire to do that. The city wants to work with you so that you feel comfortable with your property. But they do have a responsibility to the airport, and they have a responsibility to the citizens of Ogden, because we are subsidizing the airport at a large amount. And if we can decrease that subsidy to the airport, we can use those dollars to other areas in the city that will benefit everyone. And so my goal is to make sure the airport is successful. And so I do appreciate all those who made their comments tonight and have presented their questions and their concerns. But sometimes we have to understand where we're at in our life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding concerns or ideas of any topic. Please be considerate to everyone at this meeting. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments regarding questions posed during public comment. Questions posed during public comment will be noted and answered at the end of all public comment. If the council has the answer to the questions, the council will respond to those questions. For questions that relate to the administrative matters, the mayor may choose to respond to those during his comment period. Questions for the council or the administration can always be sent to citycouncil@ogdencity.com. So we've got some people here. We'll go ahead and do we have a couple with their hands raised. First is David Timmerman. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
David Timmerman, and I live here in Ogden, Utah. My comment is strictly about the CREA, or the 100% renewable challenge, which the city agreed to sign on with over a year ago. I know that there's been some talk about concerns regarding the poor and how this could challenge them. And of course, that's not necessarily true, because everyone will have an opportunity to opt out in the future. We've come this far. Please continue your support of this movement for clean air to help us solve our climate crisis. In the last month or two, we have seen increased winds, and it seems like every year the downslope winds become more and more violent and more frequent. And I do believe that this is 100% caused by climate change across the world due to our excessive use of carbon. I think it would really be a feather in the cap of the residents of Ogden to be able to say that we are among the forefront and the leaders in this movement to clear our air and to help do all we can to not continue using fossil fuel, which is leading to this crisis. So please, if you could continue your good support. If we haven't won you over, if you look at the stats and you listen to the experts, and I'm not one of them, they all agree that the cost of staying with fossil fuel is going to be a lot more expensive and continues to climb as the cost for renewable energies, which Rocky Mountain Power is reluctant to begin, will decline. And so if you could, again, review this and stay strong and support this movement, I think it is very important to the entire planet, but especially to those of us that live here. And I think it'll make a big difference. I know it will make me feel better. All right, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, and have a good evening, folks.
Thank you, David. Okay, next up is Schneider Destin. Go ahead, Schneider. Please state your name and address for the record again, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
This is Schneider Destin. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. The only thing I want to say again is somebody said something about the city subsidizing the airport. So what's happening if hangars get taken away is hangar owners are subsidizing the city and the airport. Again, like I stated earlier, I was a renter before I bought. And throughout that whole process, I've been in contact with the airport office. And I've had great experiences with them, honestly. But never did I understand I was getting into a situation where this improvement upon the land that I'm buying was going to be taken away. And that part, I got to say, is frustrating. I'm trying to limit my words because I'm very frustrated. But I'll end with this. Two things. First thing, if I had a chance to keep on renting at Ogden, and I did, I would have just done that, then buy at Ogden just to have the city take it away. That makes no sense whatsoever. And there's rentals at Ogden right now. So it's not a matter of like you rent or you get booted out. So that's thing number one. And this whole situation is frustrating because we hear one side, but we're not hearing the dialogue, which I wish there would be more dialogue than just trying to rush it through. And it's just one of those situations feel like whoever's talking is going to sound like whatever they're saying makes sense until you have the dialogue to see both sides. You know, it's like that scripture that talks about the first person that speaks seems right. And then somebody else comes and says something and everybody's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. In my experience with Ogden, I never knew that these hangars were going to be taken away. I thought as long as we did what we needed to maintain our buildings, we're fine. And that was the experience that and the history that Ogden had. this huge change should not be happening this fast. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Schneider. Next up is a phone-in caller. The last three numbers of your phone are 223. If that is you, go ahead. The time is now yours. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, Leslie Briggs here, Ogden, Utah. I just want to say I'd like to congratulate Brian on bringing the new airline into Ogden to bring some business here. One thing I would like to clarify here to Chairman, the Chairperson, Councilman Doug Stevens, was talking about the airport being profitable. Brian boasted about making Reading profitable to only $2.7 million. The FAA grant assurances does not require the airport to make a profit. The air grant assurances require the airport to be self-sustaining. Any money that is made on the airport has to stay on the airport. It does not go to the city. So also, most of the money that's brought into this charged by the airport as regards revenue rents, there's no consideration taken into the value of what this airport brings into the community. By Brian's own numbers, this airport is worth $105 million to the local community. But the cost of running the airport primarily is borne on the tenants at the airport. I'd like to mention that companies like Williams, Home Depot, Target, Walmart, all fly their private jets into Ogden, purchase fuel here, but they bring into this economy. And businesses are served by this airport, but most of the cost of running this airport is borne by the tenants on the airport. Anyway, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Renee. Go ahead, Renee, state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Renee Felker, resident of Ogden. I take it you can hear me.
Yes.
Councilman Stevens said that the city does not want to take the property. Well, I think there's nothing further from the truth than that. This particular change for the people who have older hangars, no matter what our current lease agreement is, the lease is ending, and when it ends, the city wants my hangar. They want to take it, and Bryant told me specifically that they want to use the residual value and they want to lease out and go make more money. That's what this is about. I don't want to kid anybody. I know exactly what was in my lease, and Gary can say that I don't know what's in the lease, but I do. And my lease says that I have to move my hangar at the end of the lease. But traditionally, they've already renewed the leases at Ogden. When I made the decision in 2014, I specifically looked at that and thought about it. And the answer is I'm going to get another lease renewal unless the city has decided to do something else with that part of the airport. Right now, my hangar is not in jeopardy of any future plans. But yet, when my lease is up, I'm going to remove my hangar and leave a piece of raw dirt there. And then the city can go get another lease agreement that's going to last for, I don't know, 30 years, if they can find another person to build a hangar there. But the perfectly good asset's not going to be there because I'm just going to move it. I'm not going to give it to the city when I can probably sell it. I already have an offer. I can probably sell the hangar and at least break even. So does the city want to take the hangars? The answer is yes. The results of this change to hangars that are at 40 years or greater when the lease expires is the taking of the hangar is what the intent is. And for the people that have those leases, we can all remove our assets at that time because that's part of our lease agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sheila Garvey. Please state your name and address again for the record, Sheila, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
All right, Sheila Garvey, South Weaver. I just want to comment on the impossibility of some of us removing our hangars at the termination of our lease. My hangar is brick and mortar. It is the center unit of a 4-unit building. So at the end of my lease, I have no option but to allow the city to take over my hangar, because I have 3 other neighbors that I can't tear down half the building in the middle of the building and expect to return the ground to any sort of normalcy and not affect their buildings. Not all of us are going to have the ability to do that. And I don't want my neighbor tearing down their hangar as part of the 4-building structure either. But to think that we can remove our hangars at the end of our 40-year leases is not realistic for a good majority of us. All the Buxton buildings are attached. There's no way they're going anywhere, and they're all brick and mortar. I have no additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no other, okay, we have one other comment. Heath Sato, go ahead. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Heath Sato, Ogden resident. I was really glad to hear some discussion during the work session today about having more transparent processes regarding appointees to our city government. And what I wanted to discuss tonight is all about transparency. As you know, for the last few months, I've been hammering on the same questions about the Brown Ice Cream Building development because nobody will answer them. My biggest question has been how the broker, the buyer, and the city undermeasured the square footage of that building and thus the value of that building by nearly 50%. Nobody will answer that. None of you seem to know the answer to that, or you've been told not to answer that. I don't know. Last week was very telling because while my question was ignored, another citizen asked a question regarding a sidewalk repair, and Mark Johnson was more than happy to answer that question because there was a good answer that wasn't embarrassing to the administration. So why do I keep bothering when I know I will be ignored? Because this lack of accountability is wrong. The lies, the silent treatment, it's all wrong. It looks like the city was fooled by a broker that was basically double dealing, working for the developer, while that broker pretended they were representing the best interests of the city. I hope this is concerning to you. Or maybe there actually is some reasonable explanation for the failure to value that building properly and for the failure to find more than one qualified developer, a developer that seems to be very well connected to this administration. We are left with the impression that there is something shady going on because nobody will answer these questions while the mayor lies to our faces by saying that they have been answered. They haven't. Earlier today, you discussed the Wonder Block development. I know this isn't a question about a sidewalk, but can anyone here tonight explain to me the process that was used to select that developer, one who also happens to have been selected for the other largest project happening in town at the former Rite Aid block, a project where the administration already made a deal at least once behind your backs? What is the process the city uses to find the best possible developer for these properties, or is there a process at all? Is it just a matter of knowing the right people in the administration? The mayor frequently likes to say our city is, quote, built out. I even heard council member Heyer use that same phrase just last week. Yet the land we have left is still being developed by people that are secretly selected in a totally opaque process by whom? I recently asked a council member how the developer for Wonder Block was selected, and they had no idea. I feel like city council should know how the developers for hundreds of millions of dollars of projects in our city are selected. We shouldn't even have to ask, should we? We need a selection process that allows for actual transparency and accountability. But one last question. Who is going to be doing the Wonder Block commercial property appraisal Brandon Cooper mentioned in his presentation to you during the work session? It seems related. Thanks.
Hey. Next up, we have Angel Castillo. Please state your name and address for the record, Angel, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Angel Castillo, Ogden residents. I wanted to talk about some of the things that were brought up in the work session. I am really supportive of the comments that Councilmember Lopez brought forward with regards to transparency and selection process that involves the public. And while he also stated during the work session that, it's not necessarily has to be exactly like what Weber State does, but that's a really good model. And as other council members mentioned during the session, this is something that probably is not going to be utilized very often. But when you have something like a police chief or even an assistant police chief, those are positions that are going to be held for quite some time. And they are going to be directly connected to the community and affect the community. And the community should be involved in that process. And I want to make it 100% clear. I have absolutely no beef at all with the selection or the appointment of Chief Young. Chief Young is a good man. Chief Young, I knew him from YCC. He's a good person. But what I have a problem with is the process. And that's what you heard in that meeting when we had the selection of Chief Young. Not one single person in that meeting said negative things about Chief Young because there is no problem with Chief Young. But in case you haven't been paying attention to what has happened during 2020 with regards to potential police violence and over-policing certain particular populations and the verdict that happened today, that's the reason why the community is concerned. We want to make sure that the community is well connected to the department, that there is a good relationship between that, and what better occasion to do that than in the selection process. I go back to the fact that everybody knows that Dr. Mortensen was going to be selected as the president, but yet Weber State had the wherewithal and connection to their community to bring in many qualified applicants, well represented, both male and female, and from different parts of the United States to make sure that they chose just the right person and they involve the community and they involve the staff into the process. If you want people to follow a leader, they need to be connected to that leader. You denied if you don't change this process, you're going to deny our community the chance for connection with our police department, the chance to work together to solve problems collectively. So you have a chance to change that process. And I highly recommend that you do as much as you can on your side to engage the public whenever we select important positions like the chief police or the assistant chief. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kent Wright. Go ahead, Mr. Wright. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
If you can hear me, this is Kent Wright, 4491 South, 1600 West in Roy. I heard a councilman or councilwoman mention something to the effect that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. That may be good for Star Trek, but the rights of the few should still be respected. This recent action that the council has taken are impinging on the rights of a few to renew their leases based on some figure of age. I think that comes close to communism. And it doesn't go over well with people who have invested and expected to be able to use a hangar during the entire time that they were involved in aviation. Thanks for the chance to make a comment.
Sure, thank you. Okay, next up is comments from the administration.
There are no comments from the administration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And comments from council members.
Chair, if I may.
Yep.
I just want to quickly say that I really do appreciate all the people that came and spoke tonight. I think that, as we know, the positions we're in the council sometimes are very difficult, and so I really admire the civility and from the people that came to speak tonight. And I am sorry. I'm actually very sorry about what's happening to them, because I do put myself in their position, and it sounds like something that would be very difficult to deal with. So I just a few of them have left. I've been looking at the list here, but for the ones that remained, I just wanted to say I'm sorry that tonight's decision didn't favor you. And I appreciate your comments, and I thank you for your thoughtful comments and for showing up tonight. Thank you.
It looks like we have one other caller that raised his hand after we went to comments from the administration. So I'm going to go ahead and allow, it looks like his name is Wayne, to go ahead and share his comments. So Wayne, go ahead and state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
My name is Wayne, and I won't say any more because of retaliation on this. But is the city aware, are you, the council, aware that by the permission of the city attorney, the airport manager uses the security badges for non-security issues to enforce disputes, and deactivates the badge, and therefore the renter is cut out of being able to go to their personal property? Understand that's not lawful. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Okay, we can now resume comments from council members, if any other council members would like to make a comment.
Sure, I have a quick comment.
Okay.
Just want to make comment to all the callers about the airport ordinance changes, that I'd be happy to talk with them about my vote and my perspective on the changes. Even though the vote has already happened, I'd love to hear their perspective.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Chair?
Or a motion to adjourn?
Chair?
Yep.
I attended two functions this past week. The one was the police annual banquet, and it was great to go and associate with the ladies, or the women and the gentlemen that were that's involved with our police department. Then on Thursday, I had an opportunity to attend the chamber dinner and program. They didn't have a dinner this year, but they had a program. And I would like to acknowledge that at that meeting that Christopoulos, director of our CED, received a commendation and congratulations for his department in handling the CARES Act. And involved with that was Sarah Stolfers, and I believe it was Sarah Neese that handled those process. I'm very thankful for and appreciative of the work that that department has done to handle the funds to help those businesses and citizens in our area. So I say thank you to you all.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Stevens. I would just like to echo that last night's police banquet was a wonderful event, and thank you to Chief Young for inviting us and including the council in that. We have wonderful police officers, both men and women, and they represent our city very well. And they, as was mentioned last night and is mentioned every year during the budget, our police officers work very, very hard and do a wonderful job protecting and providing security for our citizens and for our city.
Chair, if I might just take a second too.
Please.
I've been following this airport ordinance. Oh, well, that was one of the platforms that I ran for council on, is that the airport is a gem, and that it needs to be developed and made to its maximum potential as best we can. And when this came up and it was pointed out that these leases had been this way for decades, I really get the fact, and I don't think I would feel any different to many of these people that have hangars. But I think that for the sake of our city and the airport, this is an important step. I kind of equate it to about, I think it's been about 12 years ago now, when we realized that we didn't charge enough for our water and that utility, that we were getting so far behind on our maintenance, and the council at that point had to really make a hard decision and raise rates, and there was nobody that was a big fan of that council. I suspect that's kind of how that's how I feel. We're kind of feel a little bit like a donkey here, but I think we made the right decision overall. I am sorry that there were expectations that were different than what was written into their lease, and that I don't know what to say anything else about. I'm just sorry about that, but I think overall it's going to help the city. And on the comment about the police banquet, there is no bigger fan of our Ogden Police Department than me. I think they are great. I think we have a very good collection of men and women that are dedicated to their jobs. That's a job that, as I've kind of done some introspection, I don't think I could do. I don't have the bravery that they do, and I am grateful that we do have those people that are sworn to protect us. And I sleep very well at night because I know that they're on the job. And so I was happy to be to that banquet last night also. And that's all I have to say. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Unless somebody else is going to talk, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer and a second by Councilmember Chaburka to adjourn this meeting. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you all.
Stay safe.
Yep.